I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. The beatification of John Paul II is right around the corner, but why the fast track toward sainthood? We'll find out. Plus, a resurrection celebration at the ballpark. It's an Easter sunrise mass in Brooklyn.
We come together this morning because we believe and we know that Christ is alive.
And remembering the way of the cross while honoring a beloved pope.
The way to the cross, to the death, the resurrection. It was a beautiful memory to see that.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Just in time for Easter, the New York Times takes a swipe at a popular pope. In an editorial piece by Maureen Dowd published this Easter Sunday, she asked the Vatican to, quote, hold the halo on the May 1st beatification of Pope John Paul II. Dowd cites the clergy sex abuse scandal that she says darkened John Paul's papacy and continues to haunt the church to this day. So why the rush to beatify John Paul, a measure that would bring him one step closer to sainthood? And in this unprecedented haste, has his legacy been thoroughly evaluated? Well, before Dowd's editorial was published, I had a chance to sit down with a man who knows a thing or two about saints, Father James Martin. He's the author of My Life with the Saints. And we talked about the upcoming beatification of the beloved pontiff and the controversy swirling over its speed. Father Jim Martin, thanks so much for being a part of Currents today. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Well, talking about the upcoming beatification of John Paul II, it is going to be here just very quickly now, and a lot of people say it seems like it's very quickly. You know, they'll say, look, well, the church just celebrated the beatification of Cardinal John Henry Newman, someone who died long, long ago, and now John Paul just died back in 2005. Why the quick process here?
Well, the Holy Father, Pope Benedict, decided to waive the normal 5-year waiting period for the process to begin after John Paul's death. I think primarily in response to people's wishes. You know, you remember at his funeral, people were shouting "Santo Subito." So it is. If it seems fast, it's because it is fast. It's a fairly expedited process for John Paul.
Is there a precedent for that? Has this happened this quickly before?
It has a few times. The most recent example would be Mother Teresa. I think both people were more or less acclaimed as living saints, particularly towards the end of his life, John Paul. And I think once again this is sort of responding to a popular demand.
Sure. One of the criticisms, I guess, that people have said, or maybe, I guess, I don't know, Monday morning quarterbacking, I guess maybe you want to call it, is that the Congregation for the Causes of Saints is maybe moving along with too much haste, that they're kind of being less careful about this process than they are usually. What is your thought about that?
Well, the congregation insists that they are, sort of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And are taking as much care with this process as with any process. So, given that I don't work there, I don't want to critique their work.
Sure. Very understandable. Well, of course, along those same lines, John Paul is someone who is revered not only by a lot of people in the church, obviously, but a lot of people outside the church as well. But some outside the church and even some in have been critical of this and critical of this process and saying it is going along too quickly. And they're saying, John Paul being someone who was Pope during when the sex abuse scandal initially broke and other things like that. They're giving the church a lot of criticism for moving along so quickly. What is your response to that criticism when talking about John Paul?
Well, that is certainly one of the criticisms I've heard. That's one of the arguments that people have said for waiting, for going along the more traditional route. And the other critique I heard, which you had mentioned, was that the people who are responsible for his canonization are people that he hired, basically. A lot of the bishops and cardinals. But once again, I think that from all accounts, they are looking at his paperwork and his life and interviews with people who knew him very carefully. And and the other thing is that no saint is perfect. I think that we tend to think of the saints as these sort of divine figures, but they were not. That someone is canonized certainly does not mean that they are perfect. And frankly, the saints would be the first ones to tell you that. So I think the equation of sanctity with perfection is something that's not a very helpful equation.
Sure, sure. And you, as someone who knows an awful lot about the saints, having written books about them and lived a great portion of your life studying them and all of that, one quick question here before we wrap up is, how does John Paul, I guess, or the way that I want to ask this, how does John Paul stack up with the rest of the saints? What makes John Paul special and sets him apart from other saints, or I guess in his case, a soon-to-be saint?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's tough to compare them. I think he's certainly in the line of other Pope saints. There have been quite a few. I think, for most people, though, John Paul is the first, with Mother Teresa, maybe the first media saint. Someone that people would have seen in their lifetimes on TV, maybe even have seen in person. I think the idea that the saint is someone who's real to somebody, to a believer, someone that they might have seen in their life, I think is very powerful, because it removes some of the mystery about canonizations, that the saints are real life, flesh and blood people that we knew, in fact, in our lives. So I think the sort of contemporary nature of his life, and the fact that the expediting of his cause actually helps that a little bit. It helps people feel closer to someone that they actually knew and saw on TV and may have even been to a mass with. So I think his newness, makes it really exciting for people.
All right. Well, Father James Martin, author of My Life with the Saints and culture editor at America Magazine, we thank you so much for being a part of Currents. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Always great to have Father Martin on the show. Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. Easter peace is shattered in Iraq when a bomb explodes outside a church. We'll have that story for you and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, seeing the Stations of the Cross in a new light. We'll take you to a unique interpretation, but first let's have a look at the day's headlines. In his annual Easter message, Pope Benedict prayed for diplomacy and peace in troubled parts of the world. Addressing those gathered in St. Peter's Square, the Pope prayed for diplomacy in Libya, where fighting continues following calls for leader Muammar Gaddafi to step down. Benedict also prayed that all citizens, especially young people, promote the common good in the Middle East and North Africa. He also urged Europe to welcome refugees attempting to escape conflict in the troubled areas. Well, it was not such a peaceful scene outside a Catholic church in Baghdad on Sunday. At least 7 people were hurt after a bomb exploded outside Sacred Heart Church in Baghdad's Central District. It could have been much worse, though. The bomb went off after parishioners had already cleared out of the church. There's no word on who was responsible for the attack. Police in China, meantime, detained dozens of members of an underground church and placed 500 more under house arrest on Easter Sunday. It was the 3rd week in a row that members of the Shouwang Church have been prevented from worshiping. The church is one of the largest in Beijing to not be registered with the Chinese government. Well, turning now to the UK, where an estimated 1,000 Anglicans joined the Catholic Church during Holy Week. Reports say more than 60 former Anglican clergy were among that number. They entered the Catholic Church through an ordinariate, and that is a special structure that allows Anglicans to convert in large numbers. Well, here in New York, Archbishop Timothy Dolan celebrated Easter Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral with a message of hope. In his homily, Dolan said that although evil appears to have the last word on Good Friday, people must remember that, quote, angels, not the demons, have the last word. Outside the cathedral, though, a small group of demonstrators protested the church's opposition to same-sex marriage. This comes after Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his efforts to legalize same-sex marriage in the state. Well, meanwhile, on Good Friday, it was a quiet procession across the Brooklyn Bridge as the group Communion and Liberation sponsored the annual Way of the Cross. Our cameras were there.
This is the 16th year that we've done the Way of the Cross over the Brooklyn Bridge. For today, Good Friday, as a commemoration of the Passion and Death of Jesus. It's old tradition of the church to have a Way of the Cross, of course, on Good Friday. This is something that Communion and Liberation has been doing in Italy and then here as a way to be a public gesture for the city at large, going over the Brooklyn Bridge to City Hall in Manhattan, and then now, of course, to Ground Zero since 2001. It's a way to bring the cross into the public life of the city.
Well, Good Friday seems like a tragedy, Seems like it'd be Tragic Friday, where Jesus, the Son of God, really was killed, nailed to a cross, suffered. But for us, through faith, we know that it was really a redemptive death, that this is not a tragic thing, but where Jesus gave his life for us, for our sins, so that we could have life.
I've been to this procession before, and there's a reverence that the people who participate have. We walk in silence across the bridge, and we stop and the choir sings, and the readings reflect the journey and allow us to reflect on the true meaning of today.
Places of suffering through Jesus' cross become places of hope, places of meaning, places where meaning can spring up from the ashes, spring up from tragedies. So in the cross of Christ, we see the meaning of suffering come to life through his love, through his heart. So even the mysterious tragedy of 9/11 can take on new meaning in the heart of Christ and him crucified.
Well, it was a television first at the Vatican on Good Friday as Pope Benedict answered questions from Christians and non-Christians in a unique interview broadcast on Italian television. Rome Reports has that story.
On Friday, the Pope answered 7 questions submitted by viewers from around the world. The topics included the meaning of pain, care for the sickly, the persecution of Christians, and the relationship between the Church and Muslims. The first question was from a 7-year-old Japanese girl who saw how her friends died during the recent earthquake. The girl said, "I asked the Pope, who talks with God, to explain why he allows the suffering of children."
Non abbiamo le risposte, ma sappiamo che Gesù ha sofferto come voi, innocente, che il Dio vero che si mostra in Gesù è stata alla vostra parte. Anche se non abbiamo risposte, se rimane la tristezza, Dio sta dalla vostra parte e siete sicuri che questo vi aiuterà.
The Pope was moved with the question of an Italian woman whose son is in a coma. The woman asked where her son's soul is.
Io sono anche sicuro che questa anima nascosta sente in profondità il vostro amore, anche se non capisce i dettagli. Questa vostra presenza, cari genitori, cara mamma, accanto a lui ore e ore ogni giorno è un atto vero di amore di grande valore.
The Pope said that caring for an ill son is a great service to humanity because it shows courage and respect for life. A Muslim woman from the Ivory Coast asked about Jesus' perspective on peace. Benedict XVI said the violence never comes from God, it never bears good fruit, and it's not the way to overcome hardships. To the Christians of Iraq who are tempted to leave their country, the Pope said he understands. He added that he continues to pray for them and the reconciliation of their country.
The Pope also answered questions about the life of Jesus, the meaning of the resurrection, and the role of Mary. Well, meanwhile, controversial Florida pastor Terry Jones says he's filing suit after being tossed in jail ahead of his planned protest on Good Friday outside one of the largest mosques in the country. A judge ordered Jones to pay a peace bond to cover the cost of security ahead of the planned rally outside the Islamic Center of America in Dearborn, Michigan. Jones refused and briefly spent time behind bars. He says he will sue local prosecutors for violating his First Amendment rights. Jones, you may remember, first made a name for himself after planning to burn the Quran last year on the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. He canceled those plans, but later did burn a copy of the Islamic holy book after putting it on a mock trial. Oklahoma has become the 4th state in the country to ban abortion after the 20th week of pregnancy. Governor Mary Fallin signed the bill into law last week, along with another law that prevents health insurers in the state from covering elective abortions. A former NARAL director in Oklahoma called those two measures I just mentioned there a frontal assault on the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion in all 50 states. Governor Fallin, meantime, says the legislation will expand protections for unborn children. Well, the head of the Catholic Church in Scotland says that he has revealed now that he received a bullet and a threatening letter in the mail last year. Cardinal Keith O'Brien says the package arrived ahead of Pope Benedict's trip to the UK. The sender claimed to be an organization known as the Protestant Action Group. In the letter, they warned that the Pope would be shot if he came to Scotland. That, of course, did not happen. And the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland will be a part of history on this upcoming Friday, when he becomes the first senior Irish Catholic Church official to attend a British royal function. Cardinal Sean Brady is among the distinguished guests invited to the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton. A spokesman for the church in Ireland says Brady was invited because of his contribution to the peace process in Northern Ireland. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents ahead. When we return, we'll take you to an early morning Easter celebration.
I was kind of hoping to feel a different experience because it was outdoors, and I actually did.
Welcome back. Well, when you think of the season of spring, what comes to mind? Maybe you cherish the idea of warmer temperatures, but also get a little bit anxious about the red eyes and sneezing that come with allergies. I know that my mind turns to the baseball diamond and the beginning of a new major league season. I am all about it, I have to tell you. Many people look forward to Easter, of course, which Christians celebrated just yesterday all across the world. Well, you know, in a unique twist, one priest who's here in the Brooklyn Diocese is well known for his outdoor masses. Well, he paired up the very unlikely duo of Easter and the ball field, two of my favorite things in springtime. This unique combination is the brainchild of Father James Cunningham, the administrator of Holy Name Parish. He managed to convince his parishioners, early birds and the curious alike, to rise up from their beds and join him at dawn on Our Lady Ball Field in Windsor Terrace to commemorate and celebrate the resurrection of Christ.
Right now we're at Our Lady's Field, which is an old piece of property that belongs to Holy Name Parish. We use it for baseball and t-ball and soccer, lacrosse. And this morning we had a nice number of people come for a sunrise mass to celebrate the first mass of Easter. My brothers and sisters, we come together on this beautiful Easter morning to celebrate that Christ is alive, that the chains of death could not confine him, and that we celebrate the gift that he gives us in his resurrection. As we celebrate the Easter Mass at dawn, to kind of put us all in the mindset of what the first disciples experienced on that first day of the week when they went to the empty tomb. We gathered in the darkness, and to see the light, the sun coming up, the light shining on all of us, reminding us that Christ is alive, that he's not dead, and that we're called to bring his light into the world. You may have noticed that one of the parishioners was holding the Paschal candle all throughout the Mass. And we celebrated the liturgy, in the darkness, that light was shining bright. And then as the celebration continued and as the sun came up, the light just kind of took over and was around everyone. We come together this morning because we believe and we know that Christ is alive, that the chains of death could not contain him, and that because of his resurrection, the gates of heaven are open for all of us, that we have an opportunity to share in that eternal life that God promises us. For 8 years, I was able to celebrate Mass on the beach in Far Rockaway, and in September I moved here to Brooklyn. So when I met with the liturgy committee in the fall, here they said, well, what would you like to do for Easter? Anybody have ideas? And I mentioned this as a possible idea, and everybody was very excited. So whether you're at the beach or whether you're in a field in the middle of Brooklyn, that we come together to celebrate the beauty of God's creation. We're far away from the water right now, but we can see God's beauty in looking around in the grass and the trees and the flowers and the birds and in all of the surroundings that make up this field. This is one way that we can give a public expression to our faith. It allows the whole community to know that we're here and that the love of God is in our hearts and that we are people of faith and that we invite others to come to know and to love Jesus Christ. And hopefully by that witness, we can evangelize.
I was kind of hoping to feel a different experience because it was outdoors, and I actually did.
When you can commune with nature and your fellow parishioners, what could be better?
At one point I looked up and there was a streak of light through a cloud coming through. And that was the presence of God right here in Windsor Terrace.
Early to bed, early to rise. There's no better day to do it than on Easter Sunday. Stay tuned. There's much more Currents ahead. Coming up, the Stations of the Cross meet the prayers of Pope John Paul II.
We are using the prayers of John Paul II instead of classical ones because this parish has a special connection with Pope John Paul II.
And finally tonight on this beautiful Easter Monday, Lent. The period of reflection and sacrifice before Easter may seem like a bit of a hazy memory for you, but we decided to bring you one final presentation of a popular Lenten tradition, the Stations of the Cross. It's a popular devotion in the Catholic Church that reenacts the final hours of Jesus' life. It can be observed in very simple ways or with a dramatic flair. In fact, one local church's staging of the Stations is inspired by a near saintly source. For the third year in a row, St. Mary Roman Catholic Church in Long Island City celebrated their theatrically inspired Stations of the Cross in silhouette. The children of the religious education program reenact the 15 stations to prayers celebrated by the soon-to-be beatified Pope John Paul II.
The fifth station. Jesus is judged by Pilate.
Today, we will celebrate the Stations of the Cross in silhouette. The text of the Stations of the Cross, this version of the Stations of the Cross, was composed by the late Pope, Pope John Paul II, and it is conducted in silhouette form by the students of the religious education program of St. Mary's Church.
The 10th station. Jesus is crucified. We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you.
We did the 15 stations tonight, and what we do is progress through his suffering, his agony, and then finally his death and his resurrection.
In this scene, it's going to be the scene right before I'm put on the cross.
You're Mary, right? And you see your son getting whipped. It's definitely an education tool for the children that are involved, and it also is a different format for people that have been doing the Stations of the Cross from young years up into their adulthood. They get to see it from a different perspective.
I've been in it for 3 years, all of the years that they've done this. Every time I would participated in it, I've always understood it more than I did before. It gives me more of an understanding to know really what the stations are about and really what happened a long time ago to Jesus.
Lord, grant us trust in you, that when our time on earth is ended, our spirits may come to you without delay.
All parishes celebrate the Way of the Cross, and in a different way. I know of none that celebrates it using the medium of silhouette.
It gives the people a chance to focus on the characters and how Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and meditate on the religion itself and meditate on what happened.
It sort of brings them to life. It brings the stations to life, and especially when you see the crosses, the crucifixes.
The suffering, the way to the cross, to the death, the resurrection. It was a beautiful memory to see that.
A very beautiful way to observe Stations of the Cross. There's something very unique, and I think, as you saw there, something that reaches a lot of people, has a great impact on them. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents, but be sure to tune in tomorrow. We'll bring you the story of one young woman who joined the Catholic Church this weekend for a very special reason. Until then, have you got a story idea for us? Well, why not drop us a line at dropusaline@currentsny.net. That's our email address right down there. You can visit us on our website too. It is currentsny.net, and you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.